If you desire to walk in alignment with your purpose, to live a life of joy, abundance, and fulfillment, you've come to the right place. This is Sarah Locke, and welcome to Purpose Unlocked. Today, we are getting a little bit political, which is not something I usually do, but I loved the speech that Margot Rubio gave in Munich. I thought that it showed a high level of emotional intelligence. And I just don't understand, as someone who is politically center, I don't understand why the right has a problem with this speech and why AOC is trying to rip him apart and make him look stupid, meanwhile making herself look very stupid. So anyway, I thought it was a great speech. And it showed a level of emotional intelligence that we have not seen from either side in a very long time. And I found that very refreshing.
What was the core message Rubio wanted the world to hear in Munich?
Well, it felt like he wanted to create a unification of the West to rebuild the relationship with the European leaders because Vance, just a year prior, made similar claims and said similar things, but in such a way that was very alienating because I feel like JD Vance has the emotional intelligence of a toad. So while the message carried similar requests in terms of European countries having to put more money toward funding military and defending themselves. And the issue that a lot of the West is facing in terms of immigration. All of those things were still there and still apparent, but it was said in a way that was, here's the problem, and how are we all going to tackle it together? Which I think is a much better message than what we've been getting.
What emotions seem to be driving Senator Rubio's message? Urgency, fear, resolve, or frustration?
I could definitely sense the urgency in his message. It seemed like he was addressing issues that the West is facing that he wants to work together to help solve. I think the other important thing to keep in mind is that when we are delivering a message, I think there's a lot that we can learn by the way that he delivered the message and how that message was received versus the way that Vance delivered his message and how that was not well received. Rubio, on the other hand, said so many of the same things in a much, much different way and received a standing ovation. And that just speaks to the importance of emotional intelligence at every level of your life. This applies to the way that you speak to your spouse, and it goes all the way up to how political leaders speak to each other and to crowds of important people.
Where did his personal values appear most clearly in the speech?
Well, I think he is someone that prides himself on being Christian. And I am not saying that because I identify as a Christian and that I'm some big fan of his. I wouldn't say that at all in the slightest. I think that him and I have very different views on certain things and very different views on how we feel politics should or should not play a role in government and the way that we make laws. So I would not say that him and I are on the same page on a lot of things, but I would say that his values in terms of his faith did seem to come up a lot. He did mention Christianity a number of times. He mentioned that all of the West was really founded on those Christian principles. I would say if you were someone who was further left, you might push back on that because there is a lot of Muslim immigration that's happening. And I think that that's causing people to question whether we want those ideas influencing our culture. What I mean by that is we fundamentally have Christian principles built within the way that our country is and runs. And having a lot of Muslim immigrants could impact that. Now, I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or indifferent. That's completely based off of like how do you want to see our country run? For me, I like Christian values. I find that there are certain areas of Islam that I would not be okay incorporating into our culture. But that's just me personally. Now, America is a melting pot. We have people from all walks of life. We have people from all different cultures and religions, and those things should be celebrated. And I think that it's just gotten to a point where there's certain countries that are seeing such a large influx of people from different cultures and religions that they're afraid that it's going to then impact the culture within that country. At least that's what I'm seeing and hearing.
What phrases or moments felt designed to inspire rather than inform?
I would say, in particular, when he was in the beginning talking about how the United States was basically birthed from Europe. It was like the United States as we know it today was founded by European settlers. And then towards the end, when he called America a child of Europe, I think that those things were meant to create this feeling of family, that we're all in this together because we're all one and we share the same values. I think that that was at the heart of his message, where he was trying to inspire that community.
How did his emotional delivery support or weaken the logic of his arguments?
I think anytime you use emotional intelligence and storytelling and positive emotion to influence the way that you're going to speak or write a speech, I think that that significantly strengthens your message, hence the standing ovation. And I think he did a good job of that. Whether you agree with what he said or not, you can't disagree with the impact that it left.
What emotional narrative is he trying to build about the future of global security?
I think part of what he was trying to say in terms of security is that Europe does need to be more prepared to protect themselves than they are currently, because currently the US gets involved in like almost every single thing, it feels like. I don't know enough about what that would actually look like in practice and how much of their taxes and spending and those types of things would need to shift to building a military. I don't know how the US might even be involved. I know that sometimes the US will train the military of other countries because we have such a strong military. And again, I don't know what that would look like in practice, but it did feel like, in terms of security, he wanted those nations to be more secure, which is the same message that Trump has been giving of this America first, but in a way that was Western first, is the way that this was delivered more so.
How might different audiences emotionally interpret the same speech, supporters versus critics?
I think unfortunately we are living in a time where if someone is speaking and they're not from your team, you are just going to shut off and not listen. And I think that that is a very unintelligent way of receiving any information, especially at this global stage as it relates to global politics. I think it's important to put on the lens of what can I gain and understand from this message? What is he trying to say? How, and going forward with that sentiment that he was trying to deliver of how can we all work together? I think that that's the part that I really liked. And it's the reason that I don't understand some of the criticism that he's getting. And it seems to just be blind criticism from the far left. And the far right might say, oh, well, he wasn't strong enough with his messaging of you need to do this because that's how Trump and Vance talk. Whereas his was much more politically savvy, emotionally intelligent, and just less, I guess, bombastic is the word I'm looking for. But I think critics could also critique some of what he was putting forward. Some people don't think that Europe should be having their own military spend because that might take money away from other social programs that they have. Like a lot of countries in Europe have socialized healthcare, and this might take money away from that. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of their budgeting, but that's what I would assume people might be weary of. Also, the whole issue on immigration, that's a huge hot topic. We obviously haven't done a fantastic job in this country in terms of making sure that the best and brightest people need to be the ones that are getting here and people that have that can do American attitude. And we should have legal immigration. But the way that it's been done has just been this chaotic mess. And now we're trying to backtrack it. Now we're trying to deport all of these people, specifically illegals. There's even the possibility that Trump's threatened taking status away from people who are here legally. Like those things can't be happening. One of the other things that he put in place was making H-1B visas way more expensive, which makes it so that companies that have these people that come over, so if you don't know what an H-1B visa is, it's generally a visa that's given to someone who is here on work. A lot of these people are hired straight out of college, so it's the best and brightest from places like China and India predominantly. And they come here for school. And they are the smartest people from that country that come to the United States to get the world's best education and then are hired out of school into big companies that can afford that kind of talent and they get visas to stay here and be productive in the US, which I think is flipping fantastic. And so what they did was they raised the cost of that to prohibit companies from doing that and to hire more US employees, but you can't get enough of the people with that talent that are American citizens. And then there have been companies that have now, I think it was Apple, who they're basically building another headquarters now in India so that they can still get the same talent with, like, they're still outsourcing it. It didn't help. It actually made the problem worse.
What key takeaways would you want listeners to have from this episode?
Well, from this episode specifically, I think that it's so important to whatever you're listening to politically. And unfortunately, most politics and most of the coverage that you're going to be seeing is going to have a level of emotional intelligence of zero. But I would say when you do see a politician, regardless of whose side that they're on, deliver a message in a way that is appropriate, I think it's really important to at least hear them out and hear what they're saying, whether you agree with them or not. I think that it was a really good way to deliver a message. And I think if you take one thing away from this episode, it's that the way that you speak matters. Whether you agree with someone or not, the way that you speak to them matters. And that is the core of emotional intelligence. And that is why I teach what I do, because the way we talk to each other matters. So if this has helped you, if you agree with what I say, or if you absolutely hate it, please leave a comment below. But until next time, count your blessings, love yourself, and stay fabulous.